All right, welcome back to the waiting room with Dr. SEC. At this time, we're going to go back to the Net Talk hotline, and we're going to have one of my very favorite guests, AP writer John Zenor. John, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
It is always a busy time for you. I guess the old saying, the AP is still true. A master. What's the old saying about master of nothing and craftsman of many, or something like that?
Jack of all trades and master of none. Yeah, that's me.
Well,
none part is classic.
You definitely know your Alabama and Auburn football, and of course both teams have very big games this weekend, as Alabama, of course, is the primetime game as they go against, and it still sounds weird to say, the #1 ranked Mississippi State Bulldogs. And Mississippi State is heading into Tuscaloosa, and we know that really Alabama has been Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde this year between the home and the road, but very good at home. And so things are looking good for them as they get ready to play Mississippi State. Let's just kind of start right there, John. And what are you kind of looking for from Alabama this weekend?
Oh, well, this is just a to me it just looks like it's a physical, pounding, smash mouth game with some long passes thrown in for good measure, especially when Mississippi State's got the ball. I'm really curious how Alabama's front seven handles Johnson and Dak Prescott. To me, that's going to be a lot of the tail of this game, because Alabama has. I just as a matter of fact looked at the front seven. Alabama's front seven is about average is about 276 pounds. And that's the projected starters. They got some guys where they can go bigger. And Mississippi State's not that much smaller on their front seven. So I think that's going to be really fun to watch, because Dak Prescott's got 4 games where he's had both 200 yards passing and 100 yards rushing. I mean, that's kind of unheard of.
Absolutely. And of course Dak Prescott and Josh Robinson are grabbing all the headlines right now, and rightfully so. I mean, the numbers that Robinson has put up, it's really amazing to me. Outside of last week where he didn't play very much, he's put up Heisman numbers almost every single week for the last several weeks in a row. But when you got Dak on your team, I guess it's kind of hard to get some of the publicity. But one of the guys I'm looking for, and I haven't heard a health update on yet, I know they set him out last week, and I want to get your opinion on this, and that's Jamion Lewis, the wide receiver, who came into this year the leading receiver, returning receiver in the SEC. But his versatility, his ability to throw the ball, 4 touchdown passes, has ran for touchdowns. I mean, his ability reminds me, they use him a lot like Dan Mullen used Percy Harvin when he was at Florida, just to line him up and do a lot of different things. And to me, if Jamion Lewis is healthy, he's kind of that X factor that the Alabama defense has got to look out for.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I don't really know, I guess I won't really know the status for sure of him, how healthy he is until game time. But yeah, he does. He just kind of adds that weapon. They've got several playmakers, but he's one that, you're right, he's a wild card. You don't know. He can do several different things. He's run a few times. He's caught 16 passes, and as you said, he's thrown for touchdowns. So guys like him can be a difference in games like this. You just never know, and I'm not really sure, whether he's 100% or not. I just don't have a update on him.
Yeah, and speaking of updates, of course, the one everybody's kind of got their eyes on right now is T.J. Yeldon. I believe I saw that he is back practicing now. Have you heard anything about T.J. and kind of what his health status is right now?
Well, yesterday Saban was asked about T.J.'s guy. Said, quote, he's practicing and doing well. Was asked, does that mean he's playing this game? And Saban just said he's practicing and doing well. He repeated that line. So he is practicing. He seems like he's okay. Maybe not 100%. It may be a pain tolerance thing, but I expect him to go. But Saban is playing it close to the vest. You don't give away any secrets that you don't have to leading up to a game like this. So I guess it's going to be wait and see. Maybe Saban will kind of update his status on his radio show tonight. But right now he's been kind of coy about the situation.
Yeah, I've said before, you've got one of the toughest jobs of anybody, because there's nobody that likes to keep it closer to vest than Nick Saban and Gus Malzahn. Both of those guys don't like to give a whole lot of information when it comes to what's going on, and understandably. And I want to kind of get your opinion from this, the approach of this game. Nobody's going to know till we get there, but I've kind of stood by the fact, and some disagree, and time will tell, but I don't feel like Alabama can win a national championship if they keep with the kind of offensive philosophy they've had, where I don't think Blake Sims needs to throw the ball 45 times. I mean, I think they've got to kind of get committed to the run, and that's when they're best. Now, again, we don't know because this is a new coordinator. This is a different group that we've seen in the past, but in this game in particular, to me, it would seem like they want to run the football more because you want to keep that Mississippi State control the time of possession, keep that Mississippi State offense with so many weapons off the field. But at the same time, the vulnerability of this Mississippi State defense has them the deep ball. And so my question is for you, what do you kind of think the game plan is going in?
Well, amazingly, David is keeping that top secret too.
Yeah.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think they're better when they're running successfully. But they just have not been that overpowering running team this year. They're averaging, I think they averaged 5.8 yards a carry as a team last year. They're averaging about 5.0 carries this year, and yards a carry this year. So but when the offense has been at its best, Tennessee, Texas A&M, you name it, it's always been when Amari Cooper's getting free for some big games and just getting a bunch of yards. Arkansas, he was the only team that's really shut him down. A couple of teams have held him. He didn't have a huge game against LSU. 8 catches for 83 yards. It doesn't sound too bad, but judging by his normal game this year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You keep doing what you're doing best. I don't think you can quite be governed by what Alabama did last year and the year before and the year before. New team, new offensive coordinator. I don't know. You know they're going to target Amari Cooper. You know they're going to target him a bunch of times. How more than 10 for sure. I mean, I can't imagine them going that way. But if the running game isn't going, then they're obviously going to probably live and die on Amari and Blake Sims. And but then again, I say that T.J. Yeldon had about 160, 170 yards against Mississippi State last season.
Yeah.
I mean, he is good enough. And Derrick Henry is good enough that they could come out and have a big game, and Alabama could run up the gut. But then again, you're running right into Mississippi State's strength. So that's going to be interesting to watch. I don't see a scenario where Alabama doesn't target Amari Cooper a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Or DeAndre White, one of those other guys. But you're right. For them to have success, it can't just be one-dimensional. So it'll be interesting to see how much success they can have against that Mississippi State front seven that really is good, especially with Kenny at middle linebacker.
Absolutely. A lot of depth on that as well. And you're right, I kind of contradict myself, but it's one of those things that at the same time, how can you not be looking for Amari Cooper as many times as possible? I mean, the guy is having the most amazing season. I thought A.J. Green was far and away the best receiver I had seen come through this conference, and now Amari Cooper is making me question everything I ever thought because he is just unbelievable. And what you're saying is true because I don't have the stats right with me, but the 3 games this offense really struggled was, of course, had 1 offensive touchdown, Arkansas 2 offensive touchdowns, and LSU 1 offensive touchdown in regulation. And I think those are the only 3 games Amari Cooper was under 100 yards. I mean,
right, and he was pretty close in 2 of them. But yeah. The offense has gone as Blake Sims and Amari Cooper have gone for the most part, and so that it's we're pretty deep into the season for that to change. But if Alabama's having success running the ball, I assume they're going to run the ball.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic there.
We're talking to John Zenor with the AP Press. John, I want to move on to Auburn very quickly, but before we do, we talked about that running game and kind of it hasn't looked as dynamic. We've seen it shut down almost a few times. And I want to ask you, how much does Kenyon Drake play into that? I mean, is Kenyon Drake not being there, does that take away some of the dynamics of that running game?
Well, first off, I asked Dave, and I just said point blank, how have the running backs played this season? How would you evaluate their play? And he said, no, really, he said good. They're doing what we're asking of them, but they're, people still got to block and everything. I think Kenyon Drake, I mean, he's on the depth chart, he might have been the 13 tailback, but he was so good, so physical and athletic, and he caught that 80-yard bomb against Florida. I mean, but when he went out, he would have more receiving yards and more rushing yards. But if you got third down situations, if TJ is not 100%, especially if CJ's not 100%. He's a weapon. I mean, to me, Kenyon Drake looks like an NFL talent. Anytime you lose one of those guys, it doesn't matter whether you're on the depth chart. I think he added a lot of versatility and a lot of explosiveness to that offense. So yeah, as good as TJ Yeldon and Derrick Henry have been at times, you know, TJ especially over the last couple of years, I think they definitely miss Kenyon Drake, what he brings to the table.
Absolutely. Now, moving on to that Auburn game, a lot of hype surrounding that Auburn game as well, and for good reason. Of course, the return of Nick Marshall back to Athens. I know he's played Georgia before, but first time heading back to the place he originally started at. And on top of that, the return of Todd Gurley, which is, you know, it's just going to be an electric place. On top of that, the way the last game ended, this game is setting up to be a great one for fans to watch.
Oh yeah, you know that you're exactly right. I mean, if Todd Gurley coming back was the only storyline, it would still be something to watch.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to forget, you know, no matter how good Nick Chubb has been, I mean, Todd Gurley, in my mind, is the best running back in the country. And there are obviously some good ones, and you could argue otherwise. But I mean, seeing what he comes back and does, it's going to be interesting. Nick Marshall, you know, teammates, coaches have all said he's really looking forward to this one. It's a big game for him because it's at Georgia, his home state, his former team. But, you know, that was a few years ago. So I'd be interested to see how he and Nick Marshall is kind of his strength has been to be calm in pressurized situations. Yeah. He may go through kind of quiet periods, songs if you want to call them, where he's, you know, you just kind of forget how dynamic he really is. But when he's had to, he's typically oftentimes been at his best in the pressurized situation. This might be a pressurized situation for him, you know, from start to finish. So we'll see how he handles it. But that's and after last season's finish, I think that this is going to be a fun one to watch. It may not have the, you know, once Auburn lost to Texas A&M, I mean, the storyline really did become Todd Gurley's comeback, you know, rather than playoff spot, you know, positioning and all that.
Absolutely. And looking at these two teams, I mean, they have a lot more, in my mind, a lot more similarities than they do differences. I mean, two teams that can really run the football. I mean, just far and away two of the best running teams in the country when they want to run the football. And then on top of that, on defense, both of them kind of gave us hopes early, but have looked horrific as of recently. And you know, it's really, these teams have a lot of similarities, don't they?
They do, and Auburn's defense was floating around the top 20, 25, you know, after 4, 5, 6 games, and now they've just been just kind of pummeled the last 4 games. And against different kinds of offenses than Georgia. You know, the one thing Auburn has done well is stop the run. They did it well against Arkansas. You know, I think the only 100-yard rusher all season against Auburn has been Dak Prescott. So, you know, that's going to be hard to keep that number true. But yeah, they do have a lot of similarities. They think differently. I mean, the way they move the ball running is totally different with his own reads and all that Auburn does and the running quarterback. But yeah, that's going to be you know, no telling how many rushing yards there could be in this game, which is kind of neat to watch considering how many shootouts there have been where there's been, you know, 600 or 700 yards total passing. It's a pretty neat matchup, and you know, and if Auburn does have something going for them, even when Philly comes back, it's the fact that they have been good against the run and they're big and physical up front. You know, as bad as they've been, you know, against the pass last month or so, that is their strength. So it's strength against strength, and it'd be interesting to see how they handle the waves of Todd Gurley and Nick Chubb and all those other Georgia running backs coming at them.
Absolutely, and got to get a lot of credit and a lot of shout-out because it seems like 2 years in a row there's a great Auburn running back who's getting no credit at this point in the season. But Cameron Artis paying outstanding this year. You know, just really, I picked him as one of my top 5 coming into the season at running back just because he was in that system. But he's proving he's more, just like Trey Mason, he's more than just a system running back. He's a fantastic football player.
Yeah, you know, the SEC's leading rusher, and nobody's talking about him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's thrived in that system. He hasn't had a lot of touchdowns or a lot of big runs. He's not that game breaker type, but yeah, he has just been. I mean, Texas A&M, he had 202 yards, 30 carries. He's just a workhorse in that game and had a big game. And of course, we would have had a lot more if they'd been closer in the fourth quarter. They kind of, they were throwing and Nick Marshall's show kind of in the fourth quarter. They were trying to come back, but yeah, Cameron Artis-Payne is I think he's had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder from the get-go because, he wasn't getting a lot of respect coming into the season. I think he is now. He's getting respect, probably not a ton of attention there. There's just so many top-notch running backs in the SEC, Arkansas, Georgia, Alabama. I mean, there's just Mississippi State with Josh Robinson. There's just so many of them that maybe he's getting a little lost in the shuffle, but he is having a huge year and deserves a lot of credit for this offense.
Absolutely. We're talking once again to John Zenor with the AP. John, one last question about Auburn, and then I want you to give our listeners your Twitter handle and such. But this is a unique situation for Auburn because Gus Malzahn, this is the first game that they've lost a football game that they shouldn't have lost. Last year they lost 2 games, but they lost to a very good Florida State team, and they lost to an LSU team who was just more advanced at that period in the season. This is the first time that a team that was inferior has beat a Gus Malzahn coached team. And so my question is, do you think that their heads back right, or are they still kind of hung over from this last game?
That's a great question, and it's very true point that they first time they've lost to a less talented team or less experienced team, a team that hadn't been playing as well as they had. I don't know. I tend to think the personality of the coach dictates a lot of that.
Yeah.
And the seniors as well. But Gus Malzahn, Nick Saban, those types are like, they're all business. They don't get caught up in that. And so the players that we've talked to have kind of, issued that same message to focus on this week. That, things will take care of themselves. But we're going to see, in the things that happen with those fumbles at the end of the game, that were unforced errors. It's going to be interesting to see if that leads to some sort of hangover. But the guys who did it, are all seniors because they're involved in those plays, Center and Cameron Artis-Payne and Nick Marshall. So you've got to feel like they're going to bounce back. But you're right. This is uncharted territory to an extent, and also can't get out without mentioning that they're facing Deacon Porter in the case in January. It's the national championship game. Yeah. So he's already had a month to game plan on him before the offseason even started. So that'll be an interesting matchup with Gus Malzahn and that last year versus Jeremy Pruitt and his defense.
Absolutely. And let me say this. I said nothing else but that, but I got to say one more thing. It's kind of a weird situation because we saw earlier in the season Alabama fans actually somewhat grudgingly cheering for Auburn fans to beat Ole Miss to get them back in the race. And now perhaps Auburn fans are cheering just a little bit for Alabama this week to keep their SEC Western Division champions, trying to get them the one loss, and then they hope Ole Miss beats them as well. But it's kind of weird to see them kind of grudgingly have to cheer for each other, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I actually posed the question during that Auburn-Ole Miss game, and that Alabama fans actually asked Alabama fans rooting for, can they bring themselves to root for Auburn? And the response that I got was mostly, no way. There appears to we got to because it's our best chance. But for the most part, they were like, we've got to cut off our right arm. And it'll be interesting. I mean, common sense says, you got to root for Alabama in this game if you're an Auburn fan because that's your best shot. Yeah. However good that shot is, we don't know, but it's the best one. So, but I think there's going to be a lot of mixed feelings there. They might celebrate either way. Maybe they'll look at the win-win. They'll be happy if Alabama loses, and they'll be happy if Mississippi State loses. Yeah,
I guess in the end it's always easier to go to work the next day with an Alabama loss if you're an Auburn fan, but and vice versa. Hey, John, appreciate you so much taking the time being with us. Could you give our listeners your Twitter feed before we let you go?
Absolutely. It's J Zenor, J-Z-E-N-O-R.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Absolutely. And, of course, any of his writings you want, you can find at the AP or just Google John Zenor and they'll come up. But the best way, I think, is to follow him on Twitter, some of the best information out there. Once again, thank you so much, John, for joining us.
Hey, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.